Hey everyone, we're back again. It's Tracy broadcasting live from New Hampshire Writers Project headquarters. And we are here with another featured member from our holiday showcase. And this afternoon, we're speaking with Gina. How are you, Gina?
I'm well. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing good. So glad you could take time out of your day to join us and talk about your book.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And this is a very powerful book. I look forward to getting into it. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing career?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Gina Troisi, as Tracy said, and I got my MFA from Stone Coast MFA program in Portland, Maine, back in 2009, and I focused there on creative nonfiction. So my memoir that I'm talking about today, The Angle of Flickering Light, was really kind of a result of studying creative nonfiction in that program. So these pages started to be generated way back then. But since then, I have started writing fiction, and I actually have another book actually of fiction coming out in 2027. So I do write across the genres, and I teach as well. And, I've dedicated my life to storytelling at this point.
Well, and this is your first book, The Angle of Flickering Light?
It is. It came out in 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was this a COVID project or?
No. So as I mentioned, the pages were really starting to be generated back in '07 to '09 when I was working at Stone Coast. But I went into it the way maybe many memoirists go into it, where I was in full on denial that I was writing a memoir. So I was sort of writing these standalone essays that had recurring themes and characters and subject matter. And eventually, my mentors and my peers were like, okay, this is going to be a book. Like it is a continuum, So I very kind of hesitantly put it together as a book beyond the program. I was kind of nervous about putting a memoir into the world. So long story short, I thought the book was finished back in 2012, and I sent it out for a bit. And I did have some interest from a small press who was interested in publishing it, but they did want me to do some major edits. And I was certainly fine with doing that, but we didn't have a contract. So I sort of went through the process of revamping the structure of the book. And then they ultimately ended up passing on the book.
Oh,
so I kind of ended up with like version A and version B. So then I sort of put it away for a while and thought, okay, I have no idea what to do next. So, a little time went by and I got some more feedback by a writer I really admire who was willing to read both of my versions. And I wanted her to say, oh, version A or version B. And she sort of said, how about version C?
Okay.
So I ended up really taking some time off from the book and then going back to it and recreating that last version, which ended up being the memoir. But I probably didn't, craft or revise that last version until about 2018.
Okay.
So it was a really long process. It got accepted for publication by Vine Leaves Press in 2020, came out in 21, but it was a long process. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that period of time that you took away from the book kind of gave you that clarity of thought to figure out what was going to happen next.
It absolutely did. And I was always still writing. It wasn't like I wasn't writing. So I'm a big fan of kind of shifting projects and them returning to an older project and having really fresh eyes and being able to see it more clearly,
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I noticed on your website too that you've won a lot of awards. Is that for this book, The Angle of Flickering Light?
Yeah, this book has won quite a few awards. And then, a lot of my standalone essays and short stories have won awards. And actually the book that I have forthcoming in 2027, which is a novel in stories, has placed in a few contests.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, take us through it. I know that you said that this is a memoir. So,
Yeah.
and I know this is a very powerful story from your childhood. So can you take us a little bit through it as well as the themes that people can expect in this book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a memoir, yeah, as you said, and it's largely about my childhood. That's sort of where it begins, which was pretty difficult and traumatic in a lot of ways. And it sort of begins with, I'm 5 years old, and my father ends up. My parents split up, and my father had been having an affair with his secretary. So it's kind of like the movies, and they end up getting married, and together they were very verbally and emotionally abusive. And as a result, I ended up having some really self-destructive tendencies as like a child, even before my teenage years and then into my teenage years. I developed eating disorders, which is a large theme in the book. And I became addicted to drugs when I was a teenager. And I went down some really self-destructive kind of dark paths. I had kind of grown up feeling pretty displaced and lost. And in the end, I really believe I was searching for a sense of home and place and belonging, and identity, really, trying to decide who I was. So I went down some self-destructive paths, and I kept trying to kind of pull myself out of it, though. So it's sort of this cyclical pattern. And then just as I was kind of cleaning myself up from drugs and feeling like I was getting on a better path, and I'm approaching young adulthood in my early 20s, my grandfather, who I was really, really close to, and really my only positive male role model in my life, became terminally ill. And in a matter of a couple weeks, he died. Like, it was very sudden. We had no idea he was sick. And that sort of sent me into a spiral, what one might call rock bottom, and I became involved with a man who was addicted to heroin, who was a single parent. And it was just kind of a dark road for a while. But the book does deal with some hard subject matter. What I hope people take from it is that it really is a story of hope and healing and inspiration in the end, that, we can feel such deep despair as humans, and we really can ultimately find our way out, So
Yeah.
that is, it's pretty raw in some ways,
Yeah.
but I did make it out. And, it's about being able to love yourself and find purpose and meaning in life, and kind of make your own sense of home.
Well, sounds like a beautiful story. And I know you said you have a passage that you wanted to read for us today.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just going to read from the very beginning, where the reader can kind of understand what's at stake for the very young narrator. So I don't really need to preface anything, but this first chapter is called Left Behind. At 5 years old, I sat Indian style on the foot of my father's bed, alone in his new condo. I'd gathered his ballpoint pens from the desk in the corner and began assessing the pictures of women adorning the pens. They wore spiked high heels and bright-colored leotards and bikinis, and blue sequined triangular tops that reminded me of my older sister's dance recital costumes. Their miniature figures pronounced behind sparkles and strings, their bodies splayed into decorative shapes. I tipped them upside down, and their sparse garments fell off. They were proportioned women, with hardened pink nipples and clumps of dark hair between their legs. I clothed and unclothed them with the flick of my wrist, turned them upside down, then right side up again. They were grown up, like my mother, whom my father had just left. I was mesmerized by these ladies, by their full, buoyant breasts, by the inner curves of thighs that made a hollowed-out space for their private parts to breathe. I lay down, watching their clothes fall piece by piece, nestling myself into the cushion of the king-sized bed. The ladies made me think not only of my mother, but also of the faceless women my father rambled on about while out to eat at our favorite Italian restaurant. My sisters and I sat silent, letting him reiterate that Brenda, his secretary, who'd quickly become his girlfriend, had nothing to do with my parents' impending divorce, that he'd been cheating on my mother for years with all kinds of women, including prostitutes. Your mother just didn't want to admit it. She kept her head in the sand. Remember her friend Marla? Marla had stayed with us for a while when she needed a place to stay in between moves. I slept with her too. We had an affair for 2 years while your mother and I were together. Ask her. When we arrived home from dinner crying, we gathered in my oldest sister's room. My mother came in to find us sitting on the bed. What happened? She asked. Krista was 12, so she did most of the talking. He said he's been cheating on you for years, that you knew, that every time he went on a business trip, it was never for business. While my mother listened, I kneeled behind Krista and began to pop the cysts on her back. I worked around the straps of her tank top, performing a job I always volunteered for since she couldn't reach. My sisters talked fast, repeated my father's words, the gestures he'd made, how he acted as if we must have known about his mistresses all along. I concentrated on squeezing, on trying to find the pointed heads on the bumps of her skin. Harder, she usually said, until all the pus comes out, until they start bleeding. But today, she didn't tell me what to do, just waited for my mother's response. I can't believe he told you those things, my mother said. She looked at the orange walls, the baskets of necklaces made of white seashells and gold nuggets, stacks of teen magazine and Prince's first albums on cassette tapes. She stood there with a blank look in her eyes, the face of someone who no longer recognized her house or her daughter's bedroom. I waited for the yellowish cream, held a tissue to catch a glob when it emerged. Then the speck of blood. I chimed in. He said he's been having affairs since the 70s. My mother seemed shocked, and her lip quivered, as if she didn't know what else to say. She made no indication that my father's statements weren't true. She only said, he never should have told you any of that. I liked that I was good at this job, maneuvering these small red mounds, judging when to squeeze harder and when to ease up. I had no worries about scars, since no one would be able to see them, and I felt a kind of satisfaction when the sticky fluid appeared, like the purging of something, but I didn't know what.
Wow. So descriptive and so visual.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Well, and it's so funny when you started talking about that pen. I was like, my dad had one of those pens.
Yeah.
And I used to play with it all the time too.
Yeah, that time frame of the late 80s, early 90s is pretty prominent throughout the book.
Yeah. I really got a feel for that. I could put myself in that era because you described it so well. Nice work.
Thank you.
Well, and I have a question for you. So when your book becomes a movie, who will play you?
Oh my gosh, that's happy. Oh my. People ask that a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Who would you like to play you?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Jennifer Lawrence?
Okay. All right. Good choice.
I just love her. I don't know that has anything to do with my book or not.
She's just a great actress. So
yeah.
I love it. Well, if you're just joining us, we are talking with Gina, who is the author of The Angle of Flickering Light. And she is one of over 55 authors who are featured this year in our holiday showcase at nhwritersproject.org. By visiting the site and purchasing a book from one of our member authors, you are supporting the local literary community, and we appreciate it. So, Gina, I want to just flash up your website here so people can go and they can learn a little bit more about you. And I don't know, do you want to talk at all about the book that you have coming out in 2027?
Sure. The book I have in 2027 coming out March 30th of 2027. So it seems far away, but it'll be here before we know it. It is a novel in stories. So kind of along the lines of like Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout, where, each section is connected to a restaurant in a small New Hampshire mill town, actually. So very New England based. But each chapter is told by a different protagonist that is somehow connected to this one restaurant. So essentially, the stories are linked throughout the novel, which tells a longer overarching story by this one restaurant. So, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I can't wait for it to come out, and I can't wait to read this one. It sounds like an amazing memoir. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. It's very powerful. And if you are looking for a really good read, this sounds like one that would check off that list for you. Gina, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday. Take care.